The Heart Sutra, I prostrated Arya Triple Gym, thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of Vulture Mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unseized, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of taste, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, that mind without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassable mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tat yatha om gade gade para samgade bodhisvaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadhatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding India entirety, along with a world of gods, humans, Asuras, Gandharvas, and were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. So what we're hearing now being chanted is the verse which says, may all poisons or of afflictive emotions be cleared, may the wisdom lights shine forth, may all obstacles be cleared away, and may we be able to engage in the bodhisattva practices.
자, 당에 벽에 나리야. 시로님이 나한테 직다. 인터넷 계속 장경기 아니 시진기 나 내가 애는 뭐버도 왜 경기 아니 취지체 되네니 고불루기 아니 오마사시르고 취지체 남기도 된 되게 대통령이다.
So His Holiness will recite the mantra of the Heart Sutra and then followed by the verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alamkara by Lord Maitreya, and that in turn followed by Nagarjuna's verse of salutation from the Fundamental Wisdom. Bow down to the Mother of the Conquerors of the Three Times, the perfect wisdom, inexpressible by words or thoughts, which is unproduced and unceased, like the entity of the sky, the object of the wisdom of unique knowledge. And then the mantra. Samgate Bodhi Swaha, Tat Yatha Om Likatikate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Swaha. And the verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alamkara, by the knower of all hearers seeking pacification are led to peace. By the knower path, those benefiting by creating beings accomplish the welfare of the world. By the perfect possession of it, the subduers teach the varieties possessing all aspects to these mothers of Buddha, together with the host of hearers and bodhisattvas homage. And then next verse from Nagarjuna's Malamadhyamaka Karika. He who taught dependent origination, no cessation and no origination, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming and no going, neither different nor same. This through thorough calming of conceptual elaborations to you, who is supreme speaker among all fully enlightened Buddhas, I pay homage.
다 두저 스네미도 다다 chuyeng에 두저 조르데 다 결이 차대요리 차들이 인도 남주 에네 결이서 다 낭추 드셔게베 거들야 에네 다 루지고 타네 마차베이나 통화정된 데기 영자기 에네 대시숑고 가져야 대수표게 거두제니 가되는 숨 전체들이 배질 빨리 나를 여대버들이 다 되네 가 바르바 에는 도도 공제기 에네 타냐 주주셔베이나 바바 체님에 취한거로서 직송비아리 엔데네 콜로 타마 레번 넘버 체에 취한거로서 니 직송비아리 단 도도 공제를 안 그서 치기 타냐 조단들다 제가 어디 디니부디 다 레자기 개나를 여래 제니 다 림베기네 다 Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Tzuchedi, Bali choosing a story. That dilemma, any Toma Pejana in Sri Jana, then a Jana Juni, Vietnam, Korea, Nihon. The issue go Lojara, Nisum, Lojara Pejasum, Shimmer, Sumshi Samne, any Turu Dumbenala, any Peria Shine, Tananja Patani, Turu Dubejavenal. 다 변하려니 나주 다르체지 나 디디 저 레자기 추유 빨리기 shum디디 예배 타라 아니 레자기 추유디 다 조차되기 하리 지나마 디 구름도 스티고 이나 좀 전에 기루 겐슈디 빨리기 추유 집어나게 디들이 디슈고 아니 레자기 추유가 나라 기루 겐바디 게리스 차대 하리 아마도 별이죠 벽에 남아서 기루 셔버 차대야래. 근데 인도산에 애니 기루 말아서 뒤에나 예원나 시리 지금 러버 캠벌이야 러버 셔버야 뛰고야 지기 이모 인도산에 레창도 게리 쳐도서 대신 취준 중에 좀 되게 기루 캠버 이메 차네 애니 창도 근뒤에
So today the main disciples for this teaching are the Chinese. Usually when I give teachings to Chinese, I usually go by the historical account that historically the Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths, which are, of course, consist in the Pali tradition, the Pali Tripitaka. And then after that, according to the Sandinimochana Sutra, or the Sutra unraveling the thought, there are two other turning of the wheel of the Dharma. In other words, two other sets of teachings that the Buddha is said to have given, which are called the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, which is in turn named, according to the Sandinimochana Sutra, as the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, which has without characteristics. And then the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, according to this same sutra, Sandinimochana Sutra, is called the sutra thoroughly differentiating the interpretable and the provisional teachings. And so these are the terms that are used in the Sandinimochana Sutra. And then after the Buddhism spread in India, it went to other countries, such as Burma, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, where mainly the Pali tradition spread. And then after the Pali tradition spread to these countries, then the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism spread to China, and from there to the Korea and Vietnam, Japan. And so later on, 3 or 4 centuries after the Buddhism spread to China, then it spread to Tibet. And so the teachings that are contained in the Sanskrit tradition, of course, comprise of the teachings which are also in the Pali tradition. And so in the countries where where those of the Pali tradition have spread, they are the senior-most students of the Buddha. And as far as the Sanskrit tradition is concerned, the senior-most students are those of the Chinese, because Buddhism spread from India to China, and so the Sanskrit tradition, and therefore the Chinese are the elder students of the Buddha. And therefore I usually pay respect to the senior students from junior students, with Tibetans being the junior. This is according to the Vinaya. So as far as the knowledge of Buddhism is concerned, of course, the junior students, the Tibetans, are not far behind, not so poor.
Kasine da 가르쳐 있나스 한다 개인한 여러분이 여러분이신 만에 다 자가나리 교육을 해야지 진짜 이 쉬이더라도 자가나리야 교육을 했으니 좋아 전혀 그렇게 좀 다시는 쉬이더시 샤나스 어떠시 제 다들이 교육들이 유전에 데이터들 개인아리 되게 취인데가 되고도 와. 다디바 사주도 제디 배지 상대 매베서 시도.
뭐 디디 창요 말에 탄다.
야.
다들 교르신 말에.
안래
그래서 표의단 개이디 야고 두르토금인데 되는 개이디 표의토로 교토나서 총리 최저고 교로시에서 다들 뒤인디 쇼로가 이슈 가지고도 교토마스. 다 무팅에 교육이
난 디자이버 sometimes.
개이나 쇼로가 개주게든도 표의디 가당직이나 지게서. 쇼로가 이슈 가지고는 지. 개발쇼서.
저다 전에 뭐시 줄면자 용되기도 와. 자외 레자게 고숑 지기네 양수 줄들잖아요. 따도서 면자치기. 그런 루주기 정주 샘지디에 출루지다 식지지기 니 용되도 와. 줄면자치기 니. 전에 다 데려다 자와의 대인을 딱 아무네 다 여대베 딱 가다 주인데와 어디 디마 쉬야체 다디 루주기 다 자시로를 써봐 아니 우머리서 출신의 송대야 디디 조 콜로 바바 시징이 더 저가 되게 하래. 데이터 뭐데 동력이 좀 뭐지 조 때는 법니 송되게 하래. 근데 자시로다这个日本出去过的这是这个哎的西京的兄弟我的东尼个什么嘛带了泡套了哎样这个我人没玩嘛我人没玩得住的吃的这些呢让根据用的不的用个样的第一个这个呀不是他搞过是里面的根据有的第一的呀个人呢他的来讲的钱呢我早些了个啊然后你这些的还上个的가서 내쳐보다 dom쳐보 그래도와 자 다가는 시게 리고 주주에 아니 타바좀 타발라야 동리가 다 고그레스 전에 난텐도 전에 좀 나가지 도심벌에 데이터 콜로바베 공지자 되게 가리 다되네 떠서 난게 사고를 취이 되버디 아니 콜로 타메 되나라 아다 지금 너도 공지되고广州人说呢是来不那么巧啊是呢，考了排个了呀，确实是我你买吧是送的，那么你把就确实是我你买吧是送下吧，对了，那呢，咱其实不是开了呢，吃的到差不多三百，等这个当然，告诉我的这个就是老子明白，这等这几样通知用呀个第一个印度啥呢，但哎多的广州。让的，所以大家能想给呢，还是的两个是不多的，我对这个难呢，其中高，是吧？向往永驻，定住力要送呢，定这的，我呢原本7,000呢送下来，都得成积起来，都差不积起来。当然，越南的现实责任多，第一是为人不多的不，콜로 바바는 송샤베 동반이기 따와데 직주전에 때네 대단되네 아니 동리기 따와 검식이로 아니 유전을 위해서 그러네 양프게 지금 대셔베 10조로 견셔지기 용되기도 봐 어다 뒤에니 토미기 담배를 가다 잡아보면 잠시 땡에 나네 귤라메 어다이니 콜로타메 더 낭세 디시고 님군도 디오다 저겨야들이 귤라메 거리야다 조지 숨기야 다 안데디 루주기 신이더버디 귤라메 저자다 충분해셔. 근데 이제 콜로 바베거는 송셰베 동리그 좀 뒤에 실샤베 탈라 동문이가 남샤디 실샤베 탈이야 동리도 검식으로 아니 유전의 세계 때문에 아니야 시기 사점 직성기 런신들라 팀엘라바 봐 팀에 직디에디 루루워체니 제run도 예바 디디다 쪼지네 마 송이 못와 저서 콜로 타메 디시베 님군도 되베 있는 공제를 차대요리 다 공제를 차대요리 어디지 말이但是你要查动的三界缘的三昧教学界缘的三昧教法外缘的三昧教了的那不然面包三昧教南大仙和学吧的
请先用茶
So in the beginning, we were wondering which text I should teach, and there was some suggestion that some people said that it would be better if His Holiness could, if I could teach a text which is already there in a Chinese translation, and therefore we decided to go over this Dharmadhatu Stova, which is already in Chinese translation. Although the text, the part of the text from Chinese has been translated. About 20 verses or so, which His Holiness has received, and His Holiness thought thought that that was all the Chinese translation had, but that's not the case. The Chinese translator clarified to His Holiness that only about 20 verses have been translated, and there are actually 87 verses in Chinese in Chinese translation, whereas in the Tibetan translation there are 101 verses, and so the rest are being translated from Chinese into Tibetan. So that's what the Chinese translator had said, and then His Holiness said, it seems there are many different translations of the Sanskrit Indian classical texts when they are translated into other languages. For example, regarding the Nagarjuna's, Master Nagarjuna's Bodhicitta Vivarana, or commentary on the awakening mind, there are two versions of the same text in Tibetan translation, one in verse and the other in prose. And then the teaching that we are going to have here, as said earlier, is Dharmadhatu Stova, or in praise of the Dharmadhatu, the sphere of reality. So with regards to these texts, that Nagarjuna's texts, such as the Fundamental Wisdom and the other 5 other texts, which are collectively known as the 6 collections of reasonings, they are said to be commentary on the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. In other words, the teachings of the Buddha contained in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And so in the 60 verses of reasoning, in fact, Master Nagarjuna clearly brings up the qualms from other traditions, other schools of thought, saying that if everything is without any essence, then that would lead people to nihilism. And so there are such criticisms from other philosophical thoughts, schools. And then Nagarjuna brings those criticisms up and then gives his response to them. And in fact, it is very clear in the 24th chapter of the Fundamental Wisdom of Nagarjuna how he brings up those qualms from the other schools of thought and then gives responses to them. And especially in the 60 verses on reasoning, Nagarjuna clearly says that in order to even attain a mere liberation or nirvana, one must realize emptiness. And so this is a very important point that Master Nagarjuna has made. And so that was about those teachings which are commentary to the second turning of the wheel, or in other words, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And then the teachings or the texts written by Master Nagarjuna, which are called the collection of praises or hymns. These texts are said to be the commentary on the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. Now, third turning here it refers to the third turning according to not according to 17 Vimochana Sutra as such, but then the third turning of the wheel contains texts like the Tathagata Garbha Sutra and so forth. And so in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, what is shown there is not only just the emptiness as the ontological fact, but then it also goes through the subtle clay-light mind which realizes that emptiness. And so texts like Maitreya's Mahayana Uttara Tantra comments on these sutras as well. And although the content of these commentaries are similar to the content of the second turning of the wheel, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras as well, but then it also contains what is taught in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. It also goes through this the subtle clear light mind which realizes emptiness as well. And so in the in the Sandinimochana Sutra, what is done is, whereas in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it is said that everything lacks any identity and essence and so forth. So because of that, some people who are not apt at comprehending the meaning clearly might take them literally. So in order to clarify it, then the Sandinimochana Sutra is taught, and where the externality of things are rejected. And the dependent nature and the perfect nature or emptiness are said to be truly existent.
차원이 실은 시스터차와 담은 줄로 마시터 림버스니 독수도 여스니 도가 자다다 내남지하다 먼저 벽이 취지의 날랜드 취지에 있는 다과 셔되기요 자다다디 날랜드 개발남에서 송샤 셔셔 쳐다와 셔송야 되기 내가 최 모두 지야디 셔셔 쳐디 남다지 이미 콩주부 이미 균선대바임이 조조도 균선대바임이 상다들이 균선대야 베자나리 예송샤 매송샤서 러버지고 뭐임바 타르랑 뇽을 뚝제 딘디지기다 제발롱아기고 송고 열어라 하다 균선기 타또 유두산에 말아서 다대다 대원도 동네민들에게 아니 가서 그래봐 다 말아서 가서 미스스 거르다 간다 민용서 거르 대독체 애니 좀 드셔야지 듣고요 자 들이 이르산에 애니 샤샤 최디 냐로 모주셔야지 꼭 계속 그러셔 다 대대비 샤샤 최디 모쳐서나 엔다 로비지 가다 왔잖아 로비지 최마 시주산에 간다 그게 애니 다 담바시 남샤디 강사람들이 쳐르대 아니 책임을 tör르대 tör대야 창전을미도 내전을대 내전대야 남실을미도 이실을대 담바 시권에다 샤지 지나들이 이르잖아요 다 날린데 순간들이 매도와서 아주 전교래 아니 로네 규타와서 된지기 최 경선대버직다 대만 시행인데 소소다 탄다를 상당 샤지다 다디 아니 년경은 이베나야 간다 유도를 자네 최세하게 타녀거라 레자께나라 달마스게야래 달마스야지 집에되는 말에 집어 껴배되는 말에 딱근들 껴배되는 페이지가 거체도와 간다 말한즈 동네민들보다 대원들의 정신들이지 경제 거는 거 녀의 식도가 자들이 이르산에다 동네 대화세야디 아니 두칸을 되는 연구하래健康을 되는 연구하래 된대기 타네 봐다 상담에 된대기 타네 딱간다 소수 대베 디기 권의 권도 배퇴하지다 민주주의 동네 진유를 쫓아야지 된대지기다 미유다 과같은 데지 뭐스면 타네 애니치 녀시 수시도 해야지 대신에 라면 규타고 써야 쳐도가 자들이 이제 남비하던 게디 산제기 추 대셔를 교육인데 냐로 산제기 추 못주셔 근데 못쳐배 제라 대대를 추도 지든 양술을 배 추시네 대세를 니치지 셔되기 어디 배 날는데 안다 송단때다 다다 누구만 더 상관 자연기
像你们大家应该都
And so the five texts by Maitreya also deal with the Tathagata Garbha, or the essence of Buddhahood within the sentient beings, and the same is also the subject matter of this the Nagarjuna's text, the Dharmadhatu Stova. so this shows that what this shows is that the subtle clear light mind is not tainted by any defilements in its intrinsic nature, and so this is taught in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, and this is the basic text on which Nagarjuna is commenting. And then usually when I give teachings, according to the Lamrim Chemo, Lama Tsongkhapa says that there are different ways. In India, there were different traditions of how the teachings were given by different masters. The Nalanda tradition is one, and then there's a Vikramalashila tradition. According to the Nalanda tradition, there are 3 points that are made. First of all, the authenticity of or the purity of the teaching is the first point, and then the teacher's words being pure or authentic is the second point, and then the mind stream of the disciples being pure is the third point. And then according to the Vikramalashila tradition, it is said that there are those of the four greatnesses, the greatness of the teacher, the greatness of the teaching, and then how to engage in the teaching, and then having these greatnesses and so forth. And then so as there is this saying that according to the Nalanda tradition that the 3 points are emphasized, I think that first of all, according to the Nalanda tradition, the teaching being authentic or pure has to be proved. It has to be shown that this teaching that we have received in this tradition is pure and without mistake or flawless. So this cannot just be done by resorting to scriptural quotations, because then there are many different contradictory scriptural quotations as well. So what we have to rely on fundamentally is reasoning. And so by using reasoning, and which finally goes into that of the experience that someone develops, that the practitioner develops, and then after having felt convinced about the teaching through reasoning, then one should apply the teaching within oneself to have the experience of the teachings. In this way, one is thoroughly introduced to the teaching. And so having done that, then the masters, when they give teachings, they are able to give the teachings based on reasoning. And here, when we talk about basing on reasoning, we can talk. I think that we can talk about the 4 reliances, what are known as the 4 reliances, which says that one should not rely on the person, individual, but then the teaching. And within the teaching, one should rely not on the provisional teachings, but then within the teaching, one should not rely on the words, but the meaning. And then within the meaning, one should not rely on the provisional teachings, but then the definitive teachings. And within the definitive teachings, one should not just rely on intellectual understanding, but then one should rely on the wisdom knowledge. And so I think this is how Nalanda tradition has, in the Nalanda tradition, the teachings of the Buddha have been passed down. And then having the master having used his flawless speech to give teachings to the disciples by following this procedure, the disciples also have to listen to the teaching, and then what happens here is that the teaching, the dharma means, dharma means to hold or to protect. So protection here may have better meaning. What it protects us from is suffering and leads us to that of happiness. We have to know the causes and conditions that give rise to suffering and to avoid those causes and conditions. And so with this knowledge, we have to try to listen to the teaching in order to overcome suffering. And so this is usually how I give the teachings, by first giving an introduction, and then how to practice the teaching. This is I feel how the Nalanda tradition follows. So His Holiness was asking how many of the Chinese are new, the first timers here. So it seems most of them are new. Most of them seems to be new, and so His Holiness is saying that if you are new, then you may not find my teachings repetitive, and you may not feel asleep.
야가게 dharma 사디 다 zima 껴배간 거야지. 제가 시제 쳐다다 스르르는 라라가 몬집에 차네 시기라리. 디껴배다 나게도 봐. 다 쳐드지된 뉴스 쳐 스르르잖아요. 에 이껴봐. 저거다 들으시라셔. 동엘리 껴봐. 들으시 다 동엘리 껴야지. 저디 시기라리. 다 겹제 동에들이 상계배송의 소연도 동해지 동에 교회 동에 누직 동에 세는 소는도와 아니 대중이 저를 잘해야니 이니 시워 처지베이다 지고 슬로토그다 동행달로 시면 메신데 시워 처지베 지고 세는 자도로 봐 시시타 시신 지고 세는 로토그와 사들이 이르자네 자 고아를 들으시제 다 지당 다양한 것도 전에 저번에 대가가 쳐 세대다 줄로 망고지여버리 아라 디드 삼을러게 다다 가다 미 심규리야 라드게 미 심규리야 다 대화되게 처리하래 미 미즈나리야 라서드 계속 사이버리 라 라위나 에 직배다 당아 시선 되게사베 로트도 코도와 코요르다 엔 런시장에 용거요 엔 sem추지 때리기도와 섬리야 그뒤네 녀도 그제연에 섬리야 저지도 스타베이나 미쳐야 그 팽도와 미섬리야고 지 로샤서지 차 저도 출루들이 사물로 뒤다 제레디 상대비 시다르샤 해즈 로동라 숨 플라스 로시 동라 시즈 이러나다 최사지 미주소나들이 중요해 미강에 제베거둘라 다 소수 다 탑시 제약에 라와로 삼으로 들레 대베 내주 차윤도 애들 라자스지 다데네 지 사요아르사로 군조요아르사로 데지 타네 다 라자스지 내용도 다 대대비치 드리베이르산에 미 지소나라 다 안다 들으슈 쓰시면 알레디아리 들으슈 쓰시면 알레니 친구의 튕기 야게 할래가 치디아리 이내 지 미망구치 지 가다 뭐비 튕기 지고기 이 무슨 부자제 생각강에디 친구의 튕기 세통도와 사드리르산에 생각강에 세야라 로샤스지 고위베인데 다들 들으시 쓰시면 나올 차시하네 리스 마치비 취기디에디 다다 메모구질이야 팬도 유해되어져야지 들으시는 동안 다 대대비 취기 멍구지 여버디디 나다 대전으로 니체 지금 사수 루수 지하고 서로 들리기다 최대로 다들 저제 더룩하게 요 말이 디디 파 들리기다 더룩하게 매정의 유식직 더룩 여댕의 유식직 다 더룩 여댕의 유식디나라 지들거 보고 뇌경기 아니 대sen직 지들거 보고 미드경이 대sen직 지들거 보고 뇌경디 다 힌두 먹구치 지들거 보고 뇌기도 다가는 신기다 이슈 가지 주 다들 먹구치 지들거 보고 뇌이 말이야 다 되네마 어디 다저 지들거 보고 뇌고 알아 다저 지들거 보고 크리에이터 누구게
道教是不是承认有一个造物主啊？
不知道。这样说，道教呢，你这个누가 말해？나信不的，你信不的当必须这个。
Is asking if Taoism believes in the creator God, or in other words, is it a theistic religion? His Holiness. So some of them have said Taoism does believe in Creator God. So one of the elder monks said Taoism does not believe in Creator God. So usually His Holiness is saying that usually he considers there are three religious traditions which are non-theistic, but today a fourth one came up, Taoism. And here what His Holiness is basically saying is that Dharma means that of protecting or holding one's own identity. So with regard to holding its own identity, everything that is there as objects of knowledge have that quality or definition, and so that doesn't really concern much here. But then when it comes to interpreting or understanding the Dharma, meaning that of protecting us, what it protects us is from that of the suffering. And so mainly protecting us or saving us from suffering is the meaning of Dharma. And so suffering here, according to Buddhism, are threefold, which are those of the painful suffering, and then the changeable suffering, or suffering of change, and then the conditioned existential, pervasive conditioned existential suffering. And then from the point of view of the Mahayana teaching, even the one-sided nirvana, the peace of nirvana, which is attained only for one's own sake, is seen as one extreme. And so we go even beyond that as well. And now, loosely speaking, we can talk about Dharma or religion, referring to all different kinds of religions that there are in the world. And so all these different religions are there in the world to give hope to people and to give happiness and joy to people. And so this is very important. If you have hope, then you'll be able to proceed in your life. And if you lose hope completely, then you tend to commit suicide, and people tend to think to wish to commit suicide. And then, of course, there are people who even commit suicide. And so if you have some hope, and if it's something that you can put your hope in, then this is something you can trust yourself in, and that helps you. And so all the different religions of the world have this particular feature of giving hope and happiness to their followers. And so since about 3,000 years, when people found that these things are beyond their capacity, then they began to trust in some kind of a higher form or higher power, like deities and gods and so forth. And so now we are in the 21st century. Of course, materially, we are really highly advanced. But then even this highly advanced material conditions that we have, they doesn't really help in solving our problems, mental problems. So what we so in order to help us with coping with our stress and mental problems, we have the different religions. They are there to help us. And so within the religions, we have two big categories. Those religions which have no philosophical background as such, and then there are those which have philosophical background. And within the latter one, there are those of the theistic and non-theistic religions. The theistic religions comprise of Hinduism, many of the Hinduism sects of Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. And then non-theistic religions consist of Buddhism, the non-theistic Sankhya school, and then Jainism. And then the fourth one, which came up today, which is Taoism.
那第二种是有教义，有教义可以分为两种，一个是承认有宇宙创造者，一个是不承认宇宙创造者。承认宇宙创造者，印度教里面大多数它是承认，还有这个基督教，还有回教，还有这个犹太教。那不承认宇宙创造者的呢？那今天就是有多找到一个，就是道教，还有这个裸形派啊。 或是所谓的耆那教、佛教，还有无神数论派，他们也不承认有这样的一个上帝、一个主的存在。
지도가 보고 대개는 나래 해질 힌두 야 지금 잠시 주의인데 릭지기 경의시 되었죠. 경의시 반에서는 랜드 계제에 남산이 되었죠. 저다나야 탑도나 아니 상백 거였어. 제니 연직적 거 되었죠. 되게 됐어요. 다야 이슈츠 가지츠 되게 천대가 지고 구조 거예요. 천남에 계절 매치. 제가 경험이 계속 매치. 저 랜드세리 배지샤 배지 영화리 나왔다가 천대가 구조 거. 이렇게 봐도 봐. 지금 나 지금 거 되게 주기들이 되게 심리야 디지털나 심리적으로 그리스도의 워스도이나 탄지 지금 거 보면 제가 있어. 지금 거 보면 전체적으로 탑 자, 제외니 타토거리. 근데 이번 인도산에 다 지금 거법이야. 지금 제주도 소소면에 이지체, 대면체, 제외이나 아니 뒤로 이거 말이 사배 로리아 가서 우리 이지치래 뭐도가. 그래서 되게 가다 라와지도 스텝이야. 양 초직네 지금 거법이야. 시타관에 미국 세식베 대화 차이도 전에 소스 막사디 지금 거버 군조를 군조 거버리 단 가서 우리 군조를 또 타버리 삼버리다 군조 왕월이 사실 레비도 전에 세네 즉 되게 난진 숙성부기야 남배슈네는 난진기야 다도 잡아서 대즉 다 대도 숙성자리야 단대판도 용서래 네 무엇이든지 이슈쳐봐 가지쳐봐 뭐는 다른 파서 남다 샴페인 좀 있는데 용되기도 봐 스다 디디 군조 샴도 두야마도 샹내 전체하게 매 삼바지 롤 레이도 전에 그 가르가 항상 편도도 와 엔다가 지 거버보 지든 거버보 쓰잖아요 지든 거버보 다 제외더니 근데 지금 이도 전에 아니 지금 거버 거에 심지어 참을라라 다 지금 싸워치고 그랬어야지 가지 쳐지 공개 어디 셨어 아니 엘라다 지금 거에 지금 게 깨도 탐져라 엘라 거 직주리 진짜 인도산에 아니 지금 거버 엘라가 거에 인도산에 아니 엘라를 그거 쳐봐다 싸워쳐봐 너시 자주 너시를 싸워쳐봐다 첩지 아니 엘라가 거셔베 심지어 타다리야 아니 가서 우리 참짓된 거래 있어. 이러시기도 와. 저는 아니 이슈 차샤나. 전에게 제가等你 근데 먹고 이거도 와. 뒤에 소소 있는 지금 거 보면 군조로 이지 제가 타네. 다시 하나 싸워디. 시하나 샴드주야. 지금. 자, 저는 이르사는 지금 거 보고 대회 취규디 타네. 메모구질이야. 나리네 판도용 중요하래. 다들이네 판도용 거야래. 마음바리네 판도가 좋아래. 자, 저는 아다 지금 거 보고 되겐기 떠줄디 떠주고 타네. 산제병원에 샤베이나 겐도 먹고 야래디 디 바샤 간다 겐도 쟁기 떠주지 와네 밀 팽기도 와 자다디 아주 시행과 하듯이 디직체 다들 지된 거 보고 민중에게 다 취지 나가다 안더러 취지 시설 중소 전에다 산제의 최기 다서야 돼. 풍불의 전시한바 풍불로 왕줄게 풍부다다 전지천이 밑으로다 풍부 두매랑신 계시계시 집에다니 풍부들로 왕줄게 그 다디 두매랑신 매대에 교원 민중에 진지지기다 다지 되되지 산제의 shum문하네 딱딱바 찍고 라와에 다 뜨지 라와에 다 강사가 다 세셔야 진지단 되겐기 대선지 산제베 되면도인 말이 해지 다저기 다 배지 되버리 다저 다 누구래 다저기 가사랑 이제 뒤에 제일 다 누구야 진짜 잘하시라 아유 진짜 심어서 디지털한테 레민도리한다 세버하게 민도다 제 다지다한다 장집을 차샤나 장집 하면을 차샤나 지도가 보면 되버리 이제 뜻이랑 다 누구야 그래 지부버 지도가 보면 되버리 뜻이랑 다 되버리 딱 산제비 추 그 뜻이랑 다 되버리 다 디기다 켜봐지 되는 거야 근데 다저 안다 가서 랜스 보면 도
在这么多宗教里面，那承认这个宇宙创造者的
So within the
那
theistic
些印度
religions,
教，
there
那
are
这些印度教派
Hindu,
有
the
一些
different
这个
Hindu
佛
sects.
门，
So according
他
to
们虽然承
Hinduism,
认宇宙创
there
造
are
者
those， the
但是他们
Brahmanical
也承认有前后
religions,
世，也承认
which
有
on
业
the
果
one hand
但是最
believe
终
in
他们还是认为
reincarnation,
说这些都
rebirth,
是梵
and
天
then they
创
also
造出来
believe
的。
in karma, the working of law of
那
causality.
像这个
But
基督
then
教还有
finally
回教，
they say
他们就不
everything has
承认
come
有前后
from
世，
Brahma.
也不
And
承认
so
有这个业果。
on
所
the
以
one
在
hand they believe in
这个
karma
宇
and
宙创造者
reincarnation,
的
on the other
这
hand
些
they
宗派
believe
里
in a
面，
creator
其实
God.
里面
And
有
so
一些的
and
他们
then
呈现的
those
观
of
点
the
还是不一样的。
Christianity, for example, of course, do not believe in
那承认这个宇宙创造者呢，
rebirth as such,
他
and they do not perhaps
他们是
believe
怎么
in
样一个
karma
心态
as
呢
well.
他
But
们认为这个
all
宇
the
宙创造
creation
者呢创造一
is,
切，
I mean,
因此呢
only
他相
all
信
the
这样的
creations
一
are
个事实，
creatures are
而且他
created
相
by
信这
God
样的一
only
个
this
主，
one
这样一个神，
lifetime.
因此给他内心的这个一个安宁。他认为
So
说这些所有的一切
although
都
they
是
do have such
你造
beliefs,
作
but
的。
then
这是
these
你
religions
是
also
所有
give hope to people, to humanity. And how this is so is because the followers of these religions, Hinduism and Christianity and so forth, believe that God is all-powerful. And God is all-powerful and full of love, and therefore, because of that, they keep their trust in God and the Creator, Allah, and so forth. And then, while believing in Allah as being God as being some undeceptive, flawless, what happens is this give hope to the followers. On the one hand, this is one way how the theistic religions help their followers. to practice, love and compassion. And on the other hand, they also helps the followers to reduce their egocentricity. In other words, in Buddhism, we talk about selfhood. So this, once the followers of these traditions, the theistic religions, submit themselves totally to God, that helps in thinking that they belong to God. They are the creation of God, and there's nothing really much of themselves as such. And then this helps in reducing ego, and in this way it helps them to have some integrity within themselves. Some of my friends, Christians and Muslims, of course, they are really devoted to God and Allah, and they think that they are here in this world to serve God, to serve the Creator. And so one of the practitioners of Islam even said that just as we love Allah, we should also love all His creature alike. And then we can see how the Christians are very active in giving social service in different communities around the world. And therefore, these religions, although they have this belief in a creator God, they do help humanity. They have helped humanity in the past, they still help today, and they will help in the future as well. So, of course, there are, from the point of view, when we look from the vantage point of Buddhism, we can find lots of logical contradictions within these religious traditions. But then, notwithstanding those contradictions, they help humanity a lot, and so we must pay respect to them. And then, with regard to non-theistic religions, of course, there are those which, within the non-theistic religions, which believe in some kind of a selfhood, a self which is permanent, single, and autonomous. And so, except Buddhism, the other non-theistic religions believe in such a self being there, a kind of a soul theory. Of course, regarding Taoism, we are not still clear whether Taoism believes in a soul theory or not, that kind of a permanent, single, autonomous self. But Samkhya, non-theistic Samkhya and Jainism do believe in such self.
离开身体以外呢，还有另外一个我的存在，或者是承认说有一个常依自主的我，他认为身体就是身体，它可能常常在变，它一直在改变，但是我是不会改变的。身体呢，它有小时候长大的身体，但是我呢没有长大的我小时候，这个。即使你说有一个小时候我长大，其实它永远就是只有一个而已，它是没办法分的。所以有一个常依自主的我。那道教是不是承认这样一个常依自主的我呢？那对这一点呢，好像现在还没有答案。那这个，我看到在日写我来继续。
So he's always asking the abbot of the Chinese group to find out whether Taoism believes in a soul theory or not, and inform His Holiness later.
就是无神数论派，他们也不承认有这样的一个没有，他们是承认有一个能独立知实体的我，还有常依自主的我。那当然，裸行派也一样。那我也就是道教。我们还不知道他是不是承认这个常依自主的我。他基本上就是说外道他们都会承认有一个我的存在，那只有佛家他不承认这样一个常依自主的我。
这是咱三界的确立，今天各个我们对吧？军队给的南下去送的다 대낭전에 애네 풍불을 전시한데 다음에 되봐 다서야 돼 풍불을 떼네 딱 말해 슬러윤들 다 나버 산제베 애네 다와데 땡진 잡을 중앙사하게 더더도 레벨이 다디 저번에 네가 그 출루 망부 예배 나라 다 다음에 따와다 대양 땡진 잡을 중앙이 뭐 규생이 타네 애네 다음에 봐서 송시하지 산집에 찍고래셔
那以佛家 来讲呢
Buddhism doesn't believe in a creator God, no, but it does believe in the law of causality.
佛家还承认这个
And so
因果的道理
Buddhism
这个
does
业
not
果的
believe
道理
in
然后也不
self,
承认
which is
离
separate
开这个 这个身体之外
from
还有另
or
外一个
distinct
我的
from
存在
the
因为他认为说
psychophysical aggregates.
我呢它
But
是只有
they believe
安立
that
在这样的一个无蕴的身体无蕴上
person
而已
is
除此之外没有另外一个我
merely
那这样的
designated on the
这样的
basis
就
of
是
these
这样就是一个缘起
psychophysical
的道理
aggregates.
所以这种缘起的道理呢
Buddhism
除
believes
了
in
佛家
the law of interdependent
承
nature
认
of
这样一个
things.
缘起道理之外呢
So because
是没有其他的宗派
a person is
承认的
dependent on his or her psychophysical aggregates, therefore Buddhism rejects that there is a self, an independent self.
미 칸도 매바 맨자고 여바 인도잖아요. 떠도 맨자고 되 고요. 배나 산지 좀 된 데기 진주 산지의 최대 나리네. 다 저기 가서 그게 원문노도 지기 싫어 너를 된데기 잡아가 타네. 아니 좀 된데 정리기 아니 랑게 두자 남리야 떠주면 저한테 송도아 배는 대시 청고대로 나리야 제당다 가서 그게 어떤 다음에 세송이도다 강사가 다음에 라버지 송 드님이 최기 다음에 남샤시다 송매지 다 구규 여전히 송마도 sempre 태그를 잔두전에 송매지 다되네 콜로 바로 시징의 날이야 최탐제 모니기 뭐주와 랑생이 뭐주와 시 최인다 풍급 시 풍급 기지기 최 람기 아니 그게다 가사베 강사께 저부시사라고 다 저기 다 흉제 전 송샤 데저체다 다가 너시게 있는 서주 람나 데저체디에 모니 뭐주리스 데빈네고 그 산제가 살이야 아니 또 주다 민지고 시다 아니 마데르 저야서 디디에 참말로 모니 뭐주리 신도나 수는 남지기 봐주 저 탐자로 모니 뭐주리 신 송샤베 대전 직체 다야 최저저 뒤져 다 최저서는 뒤져 거시긴 걸이야 야 도시는 송샤베디 다치 신발 로리야 뭐출 체제 여대버텔라 아니 모니 매버 시신기 중나로 모니 매버 송어디 모니 미주 숨을 거네 아니 송인 세네 너랑게 공부 너도 공부 되나 이 송야라 아니 삼삼배 로빈 침보즈 다全能 대전 숨치 向往 군다 용주선에 동시 向往 가서 군다 그 동배 가서 거시대 가서 군다 그 동배 용주선에 천이 숨치 대단에 애들랑 천이 주어다랑 천이 뭐주 차체네 송샤를 직 용도가 절대더라 그 고마라 자어들이 인데 최지 다음에 담배 너리나야 야 다음에 먼저 니소 저다 우모베 송어는 지금 최 탐제 담배 동을 시작하게 다도 제 다야 최리야 대전 숨체네 아니 뭐니 주어도 뭐 주어 찬니 체체 랑신이 주어도 뭐 주어 찬니 체체 송샤 어디를 용되기도 와 자, 디디 디탄에 아주 가르 구글했으려나 아주 가르 거야 요래. 선나 다 뒤제 컴다 매바 맨저 여바 인도 자르럽자 참지 구구여바 쇠세 구구여바 디럽자 직두라 디 잡된 떠줄디 맨저 구구여바지 사우샤도. 자, 디리 인도산에 점물이 디가를 여대왜 아다지 주로 참을라야 아주 그거지야 디 개심샤데 대바도 그거 여와치 대바디 소수 주기 대체 소수 줄로 대체 그거디 치 사물로냐 체고야디 개시버려도 와 다버도 들이켜서 말기 루주상도 마세베 들이켜서 이니 최사게 타냐 소소소다 주기 줄로 만들었다 민마다 지역 인도산에 디젠적이 아니 차당 초리 저등지 용되기도 와 다디 뭐가 좋아 녀터 매매 녀터 선다 줄로디디 럽지 찍규 되게 봐 특히 전에 럽지 찍규 되게 참바 자와 서바 아니 뒤중 차시 랑랑 그게 럽좀 송 지금 송야 아니 장된 거야 주로 참에 찍어 다 디디 영향이 잠적 거야 아니 서바 거야 서바 거야 생에 되게 염색 거 있잖아요 직직이 지들 거 봐봐 거래 다 지들 거 봐봐 공부다 아 투부치고 그래스 제시다 뜻이 추현직이 교전들이 계시네 동네 쭉 샹은 내에 자와지면이나 그 대기는 저부터랑 동행이 그래. 그 내가를 샹의 판다에 자와지면이나 대인 저부터 랑 판다 연구를 했네. 요렇게 샹이 참석과 시도가. 샹 내가 맞았어. 샹도 찍었다. 떠주면다. 자들이 인도산에 떠주면다디 고구도가 메이크업도 매번 나서 여기 인도산에 고요. 좀 된데 지기 제선 장등에 뒤제나리네 컴도 보면 저 여기 인도산에 좀 된데 애네 거배왕기 뒤제 컴도 매번도 뛰네 애네 그러다니 단 넘기면서 뒤무도가 수업이 공부 수업이 공부했잖아 수업이 뒤제 메시지 컴도 매번도 뛰는 숭셰에 수업되기 단다마트 단다샤단디 송업이 공부를디 송업이 공부 말이지. 자, 송업 좀 된데 공부디 모님에게 따왔더리. 이네 뒤제 모님에게 따와로 뭐숨에게 뒤제 되라 좀 된데 너도 공부했다고. 아니 생이송이 야와 챘니. 모니 주모도 차친의 랑신이 주모도 차친의 송어래. 뒤 송업이 공부 잘돼요. 송업이 공부이. 송업이 공부 면세. 또 시도. 자, 저희 인도산에 아주 줄로 상황을이야. 떠주면 저 균제도 제제 어떻게 나버리신 시작하냐 말이야. 럽저디 밀리아 삼바상고 쳐버리. 밀을 내가 깨지야 말이. 서버 공부를 했으니 주로 삼에서도 세상에서 그셔져 봐야 돼. 개침을 하셔. 그래서 주로 삼월로 튼지용야. 주로 삼월로 배 지기지기야. 아니 지 최적은 도시야 지기. 아주 배주 쳐봐야 개침을 하셔.
因为有不同的根器、不同的想法、不同的欲望以及需求，所以才有不同的。
And so, with regard to the different teachings, of course, there are different philosophical understanding according to the different followers, the inclination, interest, and the nature or character of different followers. There are different. We need all these different philosophical traditions as well. Even within Buddhism, the followers of the Buddha are, according to their mental capacity, some being more sharper and others being duller. I mean, the Buddha also has given different teachings. For example, in the Four Noble Truths, the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha didn't go into the subtle emptiness or the selflessness of phenomena, but then the selflessness of persons. In other words, the grosser level of selflessness of persons is taught. And then in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, everything is said to be empty of any self-identity as such, having any essence in them, and such as those of the form, the body, and up to that of the omniscient mind. And everything is said to be empty of any in essence and self-identity as such. And then there are also those of the teachings on the the stream enterers, and then those who are on the resultant, the result of the stream entry, and so forth. There's 8 different Arya beings, and then those of the 5 paths systems, as well as the 10 bodhisattva grounds, are said to be empty of any self-identity, essence. And then the resultant state of Buddhahood, omniscient state, and so forth, are also said to be empty of any self-identity or essence. And so these different teachings are given in accordance with the capacity of the different disciples. So for those disciples who are not able to take the teachings of this second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, literally, then what is done is that in the third turning of the wheel, according to Samdhini Mochana Sutra, it is said that these what is taught literally as being having no essence or selfhood in the second in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are taught with these reasons in mind, that what is known as the imputed nature are without any self-identity as such, and then the self-characterization, and then the dependent nature are said to be empty of birth from the characteristic of birth, and then the perfect nature are said to be empty of ultimate characteristic. And so these in this way, for those who are not able to take the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras literally, this is how it's interpreted according to Samdhini Mochana Sutra, and within it there are it makes difference between the imputed nature being without any self-characterization, and then the dependent nature and perfect nature having their self-identity, self-characterized phenomena. And then within the teachings which show those of the selflessness of phenomena, of course, there are different understandings according to the Chittamatra school as well as the Madhyamaka school. And within the Madhyamaka also, there are those who accept that there is self-characterized phenomena, whereas the things are not truly existent as such. And so all these different ways of teaching, all these are contained in the words of the Buddha himself. And so what we must learn from this is that although as far as the ethical practices, such as those of love, compassion, generosity, tolerance, and so forth are concerned, they are same. But then these also must be supported by different philosophical understandings, philosophical views as well. And so because of because we find these in the teaching of the Buddha himself, therefore we can also see that the other traditions, the other religious traditions, non-Buddhist traditions, also are worthy of our respect. Although we may not say that we can believe in their teaching as such, but then we should still respect them. So we have to be able to differentiate between what we believe in and what we respect. And so we should believe in our own tradition, of course, and but then while doing so, we should have respect to the other traditions as well. And so just because we have all these different names of religions, we should not make that as a point or ground for conflict, for quarrel and so forth. But all the religions have this common practice, which are those of the love, compassion, truthfulness, patience, tolerance, contentment, self-discipline, and so forth. And so, although we have philosophical differences amongst these different religions, but these have to become as reasoning to support the ethical practices of love, compassion, and so forth. So when it comes to that, of course, the theistic followers of the theistic religions can say they should practice love, compassion, tolerance, and so forth because of being the same creature of the same God or Allah and so forth. And whereas those of the non-theistic religions should reason out that because things have come through the causes and conditions, therefore causes and conditions which are harmful to oneself and others are negative, and those which are helpful to others are positive. And so accordingly they should follow the law of causality in order to support their belief in the practice of love, compassion, and so forth. And so we need all these different philosophical traditions. So even the Buddha himself gave all these different varieties of teachings, which may seem contradictory on the surface level, but these are given in accordance with the capacity of his followers. And then
Chulu down the Toru, Chulu, the Sangman Lolia, Jebe Chachik, Toru Chachik, Nietzsche. Jebe Chatella, Patches Homolo, Zaw, the Chiborarisha, Chamba, Zawa, Samish. Shadows of the Massive, Laling today, Mogodoa. Halambe Church in the Samtabina, Chizamudi Digangi, Mikos or Rocha. Any shame with on a Miko or Rocha, trading with on a Miko or Rocha, you should have a Perishuk Chishuri. As on Nabata Yamada. Hindu Narisha Yama, that cheese with that typically you go about the share, you should Chishuri. Ten edgy that Shangi, Shamdi Tuyagi, Simshu, Yoyati, so to show Tabata Yungor. But I'm going to Jahanang, the African Adva, Saja, Tungi, Yo, Shooteria. 이슈 처벌들이 신용을 하셔야 지금 당하는 지금 최대한 샴디 쉬어야는데 용되게 도와. 자들이 인도산에 지금 참바다 제 지금 남녀샤세리 다 주로 참으로 로지 직구에 되거든. 다 서비스하네. 다 뒤쪽에 들어가다. 떠도 뒤쪽에 들어가다. 자들이 인도산에 다 떠도 차네. 아니 다치 좀 싫어요. 레디 있는데 주지 주터들이 주터 되게 주셔 가려서다 미사바 상고치다 미 열어줄 거야 미 창내줄 거야 다들 주시 들어와 뒤집어려도 사들이 있는데 다 떠주면 저한테 야니 찍고 주나 따나 산지를 채워놔 차샤나 아니 우마베 따와디 섭슈리 약슈리스 럽초그레디 이네 셀셀을 쳐드셔야 되잖아. 우메가 따왔대. 우메가 따왔대. 뉴욕을 모두 팽겨 말아. 자자가 셈잔데 따에 뒤 하도다. 쳐드셔야 되잖아. 셈잔데 따왔대. 서시 차려. 사디 베디 베디 천에 다 지들거버 강사 규치라고 찍어 지들거버 떠주디 누가 치슈 섭슈이 되지. 강사 될을 때나 지들 거법은 되게 취규디 서샤도 약슈샤도. 남중 에디셔야 돼. 나는 맨 샤샤나. 맨 너무 직송제. 맨 탐색하는 약슈를 럽트 하면 봐. 내가 치다고 지기 그 수국함다. 낮에 법다. 디디 오안에 다 콜라 맨디 섭슈리스 럭그리 마도 맨디 강을 태세 유태도 만들어 타네 맨디 약슈리 섭슈리도 통말. 그래서 저는 인도산에 출루 몽구 지역에 나리야. 저 약슈 가르스러나 맨디 디샤 통말 쓰기. 저 소소소 감도 매번 되는 루주리 소소 칸다 매봤다 참바지기 강북에 롤 팬체지다 롤북에 죽셔스도는 대 강사대로 섭슈샤죠 대 약슈샤죠 대제 마도 지용의 최식 디역을 디약슈스는 또 많이 쓰셔야 돼요.
那如果我们提到有人会问说，那这么多宗教，哪一个宗教是？
So within the teaching of the Buddha, of course, there are those teachings which are said to be the intent of the teacher, and then there are teachings which are said to be just the intent or the purpose of the scripture themselves, and not the intent of the teacher as such. For example, the Buddha's final intent is to show that of the selflessness of everything, that everything has no essence at all, no identity. Whereas in certain scriptures, he has, of course, made distinction between what has essence and what has not essence and so forth. So these should be left as the import of the teaching, the scripture themselves, and not the intent of the teacher as such.
有些呢对这方面的这样的一个实践呢，却做得非常的完美。那
And so all the different religious traditions have the same practice, same moral practice, and therefore we should work towards harmony, between all the different religions, and it's very important for us to hold oneself, each other as brothers and sisters in different religions. And then, of course, when it comes to the religions, we cannot say which is the best and which is the worst, or which is good and bad. It's very difficult to make that kind of distinction, generalize such a distinction. Within the religion, we have the ethical practices, which comprise of those love, compassion, and so forth, which are all same in all the religions. And when it comes to the Christians, of course, we can see that they have done the greatest social service in the world so far, and in terms of helping the poor people financially, as well as education and health and so forth, they have done the greatest job in helping others. We can see the Christian brothers and sisters working on serving communities in India, very poor backward communities in India and Africa and so forth. And so it's very clear that in terms of the practice of love, compassion, and so forth, all the different religions have the same practice. So this is the goal, the objective of all the different religions, whereas the philosophical background that they use, such as the creator, God, or law of causality and so forth, have to be the reason to prove that we have to engage in these practices. And so when it comes to philosophy, the philosophical understanding, if you ask me which is good or bad, philosophical understanding of which religion is good or bad, it's very difficult to say, because even within within Buddhism, we have all these philosophical schools of thought, such as Madhyamaka, the school, for whom, of course, the Buddha's teaching that everything is empty of any intrinsic nature is the best and the highest form of teaching, whereas this does not hold true for the Chittamatrins, the follower of the mind-only school. For the followers of the mind-only school, the Chittamatrins, the Buddha's teaching that they can take according to their capacity, the Chittamatra teachings are the best philosophical philosophy. And so in this way, it depends on the believers themselves. And so for theistic believers in theistic religions, the creator God, believing in the creator God is the best way of carrying on with their life in practice of compassion, serving others, and so forth. And so it's like an analogy would be like medicine. We cannot say, pick up a medicine and say, this is the best medicine one of all. That because whether medicine is good or bad has to be decided on the basis of how effective it is to the patients, the illnesses. So for certain individual patients, there's some medicines may be best, whereas others are not. And so this has to be distinguished on the basis of the patients.
Secular ethics Lotongda sums kone peji yedesha jalia. So that did represent the unity gala, go shaburi. Zawuli mitungju, dunju, samasimji yedevenalia, Manguji, Modaran church tava peji yamari. That my church is in Saturday, so Timzang Chichavi in Saturday, Shagre Mato, Modaran, Nini Tawjadalia, that Shasha the schemazing. Penangana, I said to Juji, any church, Kaza, the Zomuni Digalata, Kasakal, Coxa Resumption, Kazadua, Gexishan, Kazadua, Marchang, Kazadua. Did not Monguji, Gujo Calendar. Penangana, when I use some gay. John Dende Chen, Sanja Church in Duchen, Sigila, Milikexisha, Milkowata, Miltozusha, thing you wanted to. That did turn momentala. Didi Shrag, that sure, the Tonaska Choma. Sure, Tonayana, Azi, Masajel gives you, sure gives you, can you give you a tango chanamato, make excision drigmari, name miltuzishan drigmar, so much tango. So, Tuesday, you trumps with Shala, Pa Messiah Tane, and post the church use that day, gets in the shop. Charging the Saldana, that so the Gemnelia, she Gagtasha surgery. That Gemini Karang Disungudu, Neti, Kodon, Shiki, the Hasani, good Gemini, Gagtasha surgery. So this is Modo Dutch, Chavananda Rebenua. Chasa Zamudi Digala, Chu me singing, Yonda and Chu missing at the Yidi Tala, Chu Kerlang to the Jana Loli, Tana Mama Chala, Chu the Tonaka Chicoma. So the into that Zamudi Digala, mix a church, Mandra, Dachi, Yero, Sanju, Koya, Yero Gita. Radani, Jawas Sangucha singing di, da Tade, Niri Soyananda, so Sugu Dadanda, the Negatone, Gogo Yoda, that did to be at the Kashmir Sarisha. There is a Nedi Sungu, and the Yamyong China Zivinaya, and some of Malekiveri, my Chamzo and a Salon Chevery. The day you know Samalog, she so Lugipe, she do Chamogan Paleyundu. 강다연이 참지 초한테 쉬우지게 최대야 그랬어. 그래서 드리인도 지성 참지 초에 초 숙체 이거 뒤에 다 참지 초 예대. 다 현지 참지等下게 뒤 중부이나 소소 셈 기반. 파페 용도와. 된는시 소소는 이게 참지 초 때문에나 소소 류 때로 되기도. 가려서는 Nanzu Lubuti, my chamzi one, Salon Chetevici chatted, the Dendendo. So today in the Chenributani in a, there is a sim Shiduchuna, Lutadaya, Lutadangtone, Mizoya. Gizol, Gizonala, Shitioya. Similar Kongro, Shedan, Nage, Chado, Tokwa, Tasum. Dende dancing, dende jibe, sembe, chudumasune, curdeveina, dende, quare give you mare, the Nanjunali give you gumare, or the Jizonali, day gumare, or that the Turkish Senriba, Mungu, Jig, that the Tona Savage Leondo. They showed the Shiga mare. Cormayan is a Tata, she Kandakasuri, Senriba, the Shimju Cheve, Sugu, Nadanda. 아주 지존나 그 정식이 나당선에 시트하시도가 어다 내뒤 존재들이 secular ethics 되지 야 다잖아 다 대대로다 추규면서 예배 나네 다 산제베 최디 주지 상담이 망실이셔. 가려서는 좀 전에 대시청과 타고송인도 전에 대바숨사시도가 오는 대바 차와는 대바 차와 저보도 잡을는 대바 사시도가 이 가르친 것을 이 인도적인 순고를 위해서는 말해. 저 가봐요. 가봐서는 니는 등록하고 때뭐 시속이 대신 오는 대바스들도 시인에서도 송이 버려. 뭐인에서도 송이 버려. 대내 동해 시험을 쳐 군주방을 쳐 송인도 전에 대신 차와는 대바스들도 전에 다 담배나다 딘디지부이나 뭐인에서 딘디지부이나 다 될라 아주 좀더 그랬어 버렸어. 쟤네 다 저들리는 거야. 다 방랑게들리는 거야. 당고디 방랑게지야 말이야. 그럼 뭐인에서 딘디지부이나 동해디 교주들이 하는 양말이지. 땐도 대화해야지. 교주들이 되는 거야. 도시 송셔버를 마다 되게 해야 맞다. 다 니네도 송인데 동해 시야죠. 군주 방어죠. 고방원들 남고말 잘하시네. 방랑지 했어. 손바데 동해 시야도 시야를 잘 매시네. 저 저도 잡을 때 봤어야 되게 거바지선 거다. 대시 내주 들으시면이나 달라 동해 시 군주 방 세하게 시방 모두 자야 디디 에네 제베이나 동제 가리는 것으로나 동해 땡에 봐 세네 라르 동해 시바 자면 군주 땡에 방네 라르 방 자면 돼 들으신 거리스 저도 송기야 어디 되게 시내수 시텔라 때네 람긴내수 람만 턱 로단시 람긴내수 텔라 때네 제부내수 신 송도가 되게 이르잖아요 다 사제베 추기 실을 가지고 되지 디 턴에 아니 신의 낭배 떠주디리 알래 떠주디디 턴에 아니 냠내지 하지래 텔라 때네 아니 더버를 먹지 하지리 레인고요 다티 사제베 추기 해질다 투부민비 제주시래샤. 나 드네인데 배는 뭐뭐 공학나리야 풍금 기지기 처리지 송윤데 시내에서 송겨야 돼. 아니 생각나서 먹고 쉬우시다요도. 다티 시내에서 송겨야 돼. 시내에서 송겨 거들 네 약을 누구를 가가야 말해. 거라 드네 송셔야지. 뭐뭐 근데 대인하는 열봐. 대인하 열봐. 뭐뭐 저 열봐. 상가 뭐 공원하려 송셔 뒤들이 다 네가려야 에네 방랑 주도 쳐야 되디 땅가 뭐 공원하려 열에다 람기다 도다디 송용 거래 될 때네 저번 것도 지지 송용 거래 지상 어디리 인도 산제베 최근 나라 생그 남샤디 먹고 쉬셔야 돼야지 대양사와 가려서 보이는 사주변도 나리야 감순분들은 샘자모 전에 송셔야 돼 샘자베 다 샘자바스네면도 간다지 치드 미싱내기 야 좀더 마워지 디니 치드 매베 콩리야 저기 열이디 니네 디 공부 터두르디 에네 간다 제법이셔야 말이스 규미리 좋아해 말이스 샘 뒤모 되기 때문에 에네 관대기 처리도 좋아해 샘 송셔야지 에네 시보코 감순분들이 샘기 꿰마 샘기 제셔버지 샘 모두 되는 용도야. 다들 샤무 주인이 되면 나를 숙소보여야 돼. 샘 뒤는 냥대. 샘 모두는 코가. 자서 코한테 써야 돼. 군조만 쇠라 나서 좀 해보지. 다들 안 하는 주 심규다가 모두의 경기 엔 레산이 동해 용도야. 샘 모두의 봐 세니 샘 투어지 쇠베이나 될 때네 아니 동해 때도 세베 타바톱돼야지 영대도가 어디에 이르잖아요 싸워디 콘데 탐지를 집어버리지 샘만 쏜도가 샘 뒤모두가 쏜도가 그래서 디레 이르잖아요 내가 뒤모두 지세 샘도 남샤디 쉽도 쉬어버려 다샘 모두어디 두어져야 돼 샘 권한 것 때문에 모두어디 샘 권한 것 때문에 여러 이르잖아요 두어져야 돼 샘 권한 것 때문에 두두를 마도 실로는 맨세네 편도하면 돼 사제의 진로를 마시고서 semmo도 세야 면도가 사제의 진로를 semmo도 세계 연하다 가서 상황로 사제 통화반이 열에 가서 지혜하고 맞다 진로부터 하네 가서 뒤뒤는다 기우사로다 되면도가 좀 전에 고란기 아니 다니다 그런 소야다 아니 내니 쳐라 탈배를 하면 되지 탈바랑라랑래 시험을 기 소사로 다가는 식 투는 되고 추임이 주신 로였던 차가 mesela 니지 똑바시는 보면 중이 대바대바 좋아하고 송샤 되게 소소 갈래져 놓는다. 소소 규디 심 투어디 소소 소고요. 자, 디레 이르자네 심 모두의 차디디 심과 간의 연구에 이르자네 티파 투어 중에 심 코랑가 되는 연구. 사주 남가 시제 이르자네 심 코랑가 하는 연구 되기도 와. 디레 이르자네 다 조 류가 이승은 나네 뭐시 류드야 류투어다 나투어 해야 돼요. 이제 조조 심주에 간 거거든요. 그래서 디레 이르자네 정시 주무주스디에 심지체. 이 모두 차디디 세야지. 디세지디 셈코랑 되는 연구하지. 저우산제에서 셈퇴 니고 터도디 아니 나마토지키베 이시자 디시도 디에셈디가 려가는 루주로. 자, 드리브 이르자네 나고산제에 슝 나로라 셈캄 리버디 할레베 실사고다 깨우십시도. 그래서 세리고들 디고고 지제 디 도나치도. 세리고 님들 전 저와 친구들 가서 세리고 님들이 앞에 구두 14고 전에 구두 지하 총내다 로하람 술주스 침벌이 다 세리고 나네 로스 가서 그래 세리고 나네 멍구찌기 다 셈캄 리베 거디 낭외 슝네 다 교저 배워 여대버지 지체 도나체 되도 자들이 이제 산제베 최대 네 도부숨치기 세리 도부직 세리기 타네 뭐여내주 뒤타네 딱 domgyawiyundu ngoy nezula keji jigdoya keji jurdoya chi kol ratchoyundu zane diithane domgyawni keji jigbedani midabaran shin sa ta di tayen go dawa de level ba ta sem motivas야지 소소 당도라는 모티브 잡아 말이 랑강게 모티브 레용도 차단 걸로도 랑강게 지기도 차단 깨고서네 로드 중 말와 랑강게 리고 때 공배왕 용비 어디 세버 자상가 시시 아니 sem 모티브 샤워도 여버 뜻도 동해버려서 그 dom지적 용도 또 자상가 내다고 동해와 다 진짜게 뒤로 용갱게 다 해야지 컨디션도 봐봐 상담이잖아요 풍부되는 매댕에 그 수지 풍부되는 매댕에 시베 풍부되는 매대버지 다도 스톰 되어있잖아요 아니 풍부를 tension 다 야말이서 다음에 제거도 다가는 신기 치다나게 저 가다 가이네 아니 편주 때네 두드버시다 마도 때문에 라왕게 주고 매바 인도잖아요 저 잠시 아니 뚜주 잠제 세하게 떠주들래요도 그래서 뭐에 내주 디셰 뭐에 내주 디타네 아니 domgyaw니 나고 떠주들래 다 떠주디타네 아니 다 그게 최랑간 레윤도 사제베 슝네 동해가 자와도 머리가 잡아레스 미시베 잡아레스 미시벌 니셰 몽상게 미시베 찍다 친지로도 따고 미시베 찍체니 니셰 다 니셰 통로 정는 뭐마디 친지로게 머리가 되게 잡아레스 친지로게 미시베 되게 잡아레스 다 디세야야 아니 떠주디를 레용이래 디 떠주 러야게 되니 영화라 미시버드 세트야 여봐 미시베 왕게 동해와도 저기 디디 시베 있는 딜레 탄두고 rolle고 딜레 탄두고 깨게 참려야 아니 떠주들이야 제시도 고민하는 걸로 다양 추스데 딜레 동해게 싸 미시베 지기 여봐 미시버드 세트야 이미디 양 떠주들이는 상담도 마도 용도가 자상가 탑기 셔로 좋아져 셔로 탑로 좋아져 들으스 봐야죠 다 산제베 치고 모두 보다도 되리 저 남중에 드셔야 되기 산제베 쳐디 저거 처음에 봐 다와 대주스 저거 처음에 어디 해지 출루 해제 지고 누구야 다 다와 대주스 해야 돼 나와란 거지 대주 달라 경제기 대중직 때는 대중직 대중 니랭도 때는 대중라 때는 샤과 때는 딱섬 되네요 니리기도 와 자 14월 10에 있는 땐지 된다 수고스 없이 경제 땐지 때는 샤과 땐중직 때는 딱의 땐중직 듀부치다 듀부치
So, His Holiness is first of all talking about secular ethics, which has been existing in India for the last over 3,000 years. And so, according to today's reality, it is very important to emphasize on this secular ethics. If we look in the world, we'll find that majority of the people are not really believers. Even if the people say they believe, they follow such and this and that religion, if you really carefully check, then we'll find that most of them are not really serious about what the religion they are believing in. And therefore, we have the majority of the people in the world as being like non-believers. And so, if you look around the world, how many corruptions we find in people, and how many of them engage in dishonesty, they are dishonest about their dealings with things, and how they bully others, even if they claim to be following Buddhism. I mean, we find people who really bully others, who deceive others, who are dishonest and full of corruption. And so, while they say they are believing in the three jewels and taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I mean, they're not really serious about it. And in fact, because of their not being serious about what they believe in, they become corrupted and dishonest and deceiving others. And so, although they think they know that it is not good to deceive others, to bully others, to be dishonest and so forth, according to their religion, but then they don't follow what they believe in. And so, when you do that, what it shows is that you are a disgrace to the three jewels as well. And so, and it is very important to be truthful about what you believe in your daily life, even if it were to be, even if you talk about leading a good life in a day-to-day basis. It is important to think in terms of the Dharma, in the religion, saying that it is good for your day-to-day life as well. And then biologically also we are equipped with those of compassion, love, caring about others, because we were brought up by our mother and sustaining us with her love, care, and therefore, if you also if you wish to live a healthy life, physically a healthy life, you should practice love and compassion and all these secular ethics. And even scientists today find that it is to have a healthy body, it is important to have a healthy mind. So mind which is free from fear and suspicion and doubt and all these negative emotions is very important. If you are free from these, then if you are full of fear and suspicion, doubt, and so forth, then you will not have happiness at all for yourself as well as the community you live in. There will be no happiness for oneself and others as well. And so this is the reality today, and therefore I emphasize on promoting secular ethics in the world. And amongst the different religions, of course, Buddhism seems to have the most number of reasonings, logic that is used to come to a conclusion in terms of what we should practice and so forth. And so, for example, in the case of the Four Noble Truths, within the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, during the first sermon of the Buddhas gave this teaching of the Four Noble Truths in three sections, or three. repeating them. The first time he taught the Four Noble Truths, he was said to have taught the nature of the Four Noble Truths, which basically shows the reality of things as they are. It has nothing much to do with good or bad and so forth, but what reality is, how things come about through causes and conditions. So this is the reality on the ground level. And then the next round of teaching on the Four Noble Truths is about the function of the Noble Truths, which shows, what we should engage in, what we should avoid. In other words, adopting and discarding certain practices. And therefore, based on, this in turn is based on the first novel, sermon, the teaching on the reality or the ground level of the teaching. And because the reality is such that causes and conditions bring about the results. Therefore, if we engage in bad causes and conditions, we'll have the bad consequences. And therefore, we should not engage in those things which bring about negative results, but engage in the positive ones which bring about positive results. And so by doing that, what happens is we come to the third repetition of the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which is about the results which is brought about through our practice of the path. And so the result is such that once you have overcome the negative emotions, suffering and so forth, and their causes, then there will be no more causes to be overcome, and no more origin of suffering to be overcome, and so forth. And so in this way, even within the first novel, the sermon during the first sermon, the Buddha has shown the ground or the basis, the path, and the result. And so we need, on the basis of the ground level, the reality of things as they are, what comes up is that of the philosophical understanding of things. And then on the basis of these philosophical understanding, we built up we engage in the practice, apply the teachings on the path, and then through that we actualize the result. And then in the higher and lower Abhidharma teachings, the Abhidharma Kosha of Vasubandhu, as well as the Abhidharma Samuchaya by Asanga, there are so many information or so many explanations about the mind, the presentation of mind, as we say. And so these also have to do with the reality on the ground level. And then on the basis of that ground reality, then we build up the path, taking up some improving the positive, the certain mental the states of mind, and whereas overcoming or discarding others, and therefore through that we come to that of the resultant state. And so in this way, Buddhism builds up the path and the resultant state on the basis of the ground reality, the basis. And in the Sutra of the Ten Grounds, there is this saying which says that all these three realms of existence are the mere mind. So when it says all the three realms of existence are merely the mind, it's not rejecting externality of things as such, which is interpreted by the Chittamatrins, but what it shows basically is that apart from the mind, there's no doer of anything. And so depending on depending on whether our mind is disciplined or subdued or undisciplined, we either fall into samsara or we go out of the samsara and reach nirvana. And so nirvana and samsara are not believed as, in Buddhism to be some kind of a creation or doing of the creator, a god or something like that. But in fact, they are the results of our own mind. And so when your mind is undisciplined, when you are unsubdued, what happens is that you fall, you take rebirth in samsara, you are fallen in samsara. And once your mind is subdued and you purify the negativities, then you reach a nirvana and omniscient state of Buddhahood and so forth. And so it's all depend on the mind. Whether you fall into samsara or whether you go out of samsara depends on the mind. And therefore it is very important in Buddhism to understand the difference, the system of the working of the mind. Because when you say, when we say that our mind is rather undisciplined, how do we make it disciplined? How do we transform ourselves? We have to use our mind itself. The transformation cannot happen through medicine or some kind of surgery and so forth, but you have to use your own mind. And by using your mind, you overcome the negative states of your mind and prosper or promote those of the positive ones, and then progress further along the path and reach the resultant state. And therefore the Buddha even has said that you are the master of yourself. You have to understand this within that context, that you have this mind that you can use to transform yourself and lead yourself out of samsara and lead yourself to the state of nirvana. And the Buddha also has said, I have shown you the path to liberation, but then liberation is in your hands. And also, Buddha has said that the Buddhas or the Munis or the Buddhas do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they take out the suffering of sentient beings like picking out a thorn, nor do they transpose their own realization into others, but only by showing the reality of things, they help sentient beings to go out of samsara, to reach nirvana. And so it all comes down to primarily to have a disciplined mind. And so this mind that we have now, this unruly mind, is what we have to transform. And the transformation of it happens when you apply the mind by understanding the reality of things and how you proceed along the path and so forth, and therefore overcoming all the defilements which are in the mind. So the defilements that you have to overcome are in the mind, and which by applying the antidotes or the path, the methods to purify them, you overcome them, and then by overcoming all these defilements that are within your mind, you reach that of the state of omniscience or the Buddhahood. So all these have to do with the mind itself. And so in Buddhism there is very huge information on the psychology and mind, and even modern scientists find that Buddhism has so much to offer in terms of psychology. And over the last 30 years, or more than 30 years, I've been having discussions with the scientists, especially like the psychologists and neuroscientists and so forth. And so they find that Buddhism has lots to offer to the scientists themselves. And I usually make three categories within Buddhism, Buddhist teaching. The first one is that of the Buddhist Science, which is to say that the teaching on the momentary change, momentary nature of things, which shows that things are impermanent. And then by understanding this momentary nature of things, you can use this understanding to overcome your undisciplined mind. And so this undisciplined mind that we have, I mean, is something which happens to us, I mean, naturally. We don't really deliberately make ourselves undisciplined as such, but our mind is such that it is undisciplined. And so we have to know that because of this undisciplined nature of the mind, we cause ourselves suffering. And so the teaching, we have to understand the teaching on suffering, and how to overcome the suffering is by understanding that of the selflessness nature of the things. So our mind and body have no intrinsic nature, no independent existence as such, but they are made up of many different parts, and they are dependent on other causes and conditions. And because of that, they are not independent, but lack any independent existence. And so because things come along or things come about in dependence on others, therefore we can see that things are relative, things are dependent. And so Buddhism teaches this reality of things, that there's nothing independently existing. And on the understanding of this reality, we have the philosophical view of interdependent nature of things. And so sufferings happen because of not understanding reality. And within the ignorance itself, there is the mere ignorance, which is just ignorant about not knowing the reality, but then there is another type of ignorance, which is a distorted view of the reality. So this is the main factor which brings about suffering, which brings suffering to us. Now, in order to clear this misunderstanding, this misconception, I mean, what we have is the understanding of the philosophical view of dependent origination of things. And so once you see that things are dependent and therefore not independent, you see that this misconception can be overcome, and then therefore you will have this wish or the aspiration to engage in the practices. So within the practice you have the method and the skillful, the wisdom.